If you go into the homework folder and the experimental studies folder, you'll find the information about the all-payer claims database assignment. Obviously, you'll be watching this YouTube video because you're already watching it. You also want to read the description of all-payer claims databases. It describes really how they work and what they're trying to accomplish with them across the United States. And then the APCD data elements is a link to a web page that has descriptions of the actual data elements that are in an all-payer claims database in Massachusetts. And these are the data elements that you're going to use for your assignment. Your group assignment is to come up with some sort of problem or question that you want to solve with a cohort or case control study, but the challenge is you can only use data elements from the all-payer claims database. So you need to describe your methodology for the study, and then I'll kind of go through all the questions that we go through in an article review, and then make up some data and create a 2x2 table. We're not actually going to pull the data from the all-payer claims database. You're just going to describe how you would pull it, and then make up your appropriate 2x2 table and calculate the measure of association. Made up numbers all from your made up 2x2 table. So let's talk about, though, what is actually in the all-payer claims database and how you can find the data elements that you can use. So the link to the data elements gets you to this page. And there are 3 files that you want to focus on that describe the data elements. The first is the Member Eligibility Submission Guide. So if you click on that and you scroll down to, here I'm on page 24, but a few pages before this, they actually start listing out all the data elements that are in that file. So you can see you've got some interesting information about the person who has insurance that these claims are being filed against. You've got their date of birth, where they live. You've got information about race and ethnicity, and they actually tell you the race values that can go into those fields. So there's a lot of information useful in this member eligibility file that would be good for your case control or cohort study, both as you're selecting patients and possibly even as you're looking at an exposure or outcome status. Probably more exposure status than outcome. Then the next file that you want to look at is the Medical Claims File Submission Guide. So if you go into this one and start scrolling down, you'll see once you get into the data file layout, there's some repeat information from the membership eligibility file about the person and the demographics. But the interesting things in this file are when they went to the doctor or went to the hospital, they got diagnosed with something, a disease. You'll see that ICD-9 or ICD-10 code and the admitting diagnosis. Those are codes that tell you what diseases or what the diagnostic reason for that visit was. In the E-code file, you'll see if there was some kind of injury that was associated with the visit. And then there's a lot more information about principal and other diagnoses that you'll see. Several elements there. So if you're looking for diagnoses, you want to make sure that you look across all of those fields to pull up any diagnoses code that may be associated with that visit, if that's what you're looking for. And then the other interesting information in this one is the procedure codes. The procedure codes tell you if any type of procedure was done at that visit, like an X-ray or a colonoscopy. What types of procedures were done at that visit, whether it was at a hospital or outpatient at a provider location. And then the last data set that you want to focus on is the Medical Files Submission Guide. So once you open that up and start scrolling down through the document, you'll find some interesting information here as well. Every time there's a prescription, that someone gets filled, there's a claim for that as well. So we know the drug code that they got, and those are coded by NDC codes. We know the name that they got. We know if it was a prescription, a refill, if they got a generic or not. And if you look through the information, you'll find some other interesting information that might be useful for you in a case control or cohort study. Again, looking for exposures or perhaps outcomes. I would think, again, this one is probably more exposure data. And the medical claims file, I think, is more where you'll find outcomes and the diagnoses. Although you might find some exposures here as well if you're looking at one disease being a risk factor for another, or procedure codes being a risk factor for something else. But the important thing to remember is this is your only data source. If you can't find it here, it cannot be something that's part of your study. Generally, things like smoking status, behavior risk factors are not part of these claims data. So unless you can tell me specifically where you're finding that with an ICD code or a CPT code, you can't use that as part of your data for your study. The data has to come from one of these three files as you're trying to create your all-payer claims database, case control, or cohort study.